Lots of recent stuff on oats. So what's going on here? Okay, we've got a lot of people that will tout benefits of oats, ranging from soluble fiber down to resistant starch, overnight oats, et cetera, et cetera. So on the surface, looks pretty benign, but you've got some interesting stuff. So what have you found here?
Man, I'm going hard on oats right now, and I'm so stoked about it. It's just, I think that oats are probably the worst breakfast you could possibly eat. And this is coming from a guy who used to buy 50-pound bags of oats. And when I was younger, I was running a lot, and I would literally make oatmeal in the morning. When I would wake up, I would go running or go mountain biking, come back and make oatmeal. And I just didn't understand how problematic oats are as a food for humans. So we can dive into it, and I think all the things that are problematic about oats are going to scale and are going to reflect other issues that happens with a lot of different plant foods, and specifically grains in general. So the thing to understand about oats, most people have seen like smashed oats. They're like these kind of flakes. Well, that comes from a seed. An oat is a seed, and that has to get smashed. So like that's a pressed oat. That's not what a regular oat looks like, but an oat seed is something you plant in the ground and it grows into an oat plant. So not surprisingly, oats contain defense chemicals. All plants contain defense chemicals. All seeds from plants contain defense chemicals. So let's just start with this defense chemical in oats, and we'll get to all the other reasons oats are problematic, called saponins. Saponins are this kind of soapy substance that also occurs on the outside of things like quinoa, another darling in the health industry that I think is not good for humans at all. But saponins have been found in cell culture and many animal studies to be very problematic for the human gut. And they're not easily degraded with cooking. They're very resilient to cooking. So when you're eating your oatmeal, you are just giving your body saponins, these compounds that are meant to be there as defense chemicals. The oats don't want you eating their seeds that are harming your guts. That's just problem number one. Problem number two is the amount of heavy metals in oats. I've really never heard anyone else talk about this, but grains can accumulate heavy metals. There's actually a gene in oats that causes the oats to accumulate cadmium. This is a heavy metal linked to fertility issues for both men and women, reproductive harm for the fetus if the woman's pregnant, mental health issues, and I think even intellectual delay in kids that are exposed to excess levels of cadmium. The state of California has set a maximum allowable dose daily of cadmium of 4.1 micrograms. And there's a significant amount of cadmium in oats. And again, you're not getting this out of the oats with any amount of overnight oats fermenting, any amount of pressure cooking, any amount of cooking. Organic oats are gonna have cadmium. So there are heavy metals in oats. And maybe this isn't a big deal every once in a while, but the people that I know eat oatmeal are religious about it. They eat it every day like I do. This is the best breakfast, I'm eating this. And granted, it tastes good, but you're getting saponins, you're getting cadmium, you're getting heavy metals in your oats. That's just the beginning part. Then you're also getting other problems with pesticides. Maybe you can buy organic oats and they're truly organic, but if you're not buying organic oats, you are getting massive doses of pesticides, as there are in most other grains. We're talking glyphosate, which is Roundup. There's been I think it's an environmental working group study on the amount of Roundup in Quaker Oats products. There's significant amounts, up to 2,700 parts per billion of glyphosate in some of the most contaminated products. And Quaker Oats, these kind of basic oat cereals, that's what I used to eat. That's what most people eat. And that's the predominant form of oat consumption, is non-organic oats. And then you have chlormequat, you have 2,4-D, you have atrazine in oats, which is a pesticide that has gotten a lot of press recently in terms of potential hormone disruption in all sorts of species, including humans. So if you're getting organic oats, you might avoid that stuff. But even organic oats are gonna have the saponins, they're gonna have the heavy metals. A lot of oats are also contaminated with gluten, even though if they say gluten-free, there's gonna be gluten in there, which is this peptide from wheat that's probably disruptive for the human gut, causing leaky gut and damage. And then because oats are a grain and they are stored, they're going to have mold toxins. Fusarium is the main mold in oats, but there are other toxins as well. Fusarium has a couple different toxins, including HT2. You also find zearalenone and other mold toxins in your oats. And again, these are not avoidable. It's just the fact that you're storing a grain, it's going to get moldy. So that's really the top line on this. And we haven't even gotten to phytic acid, which is this compound that chelates minerals. And that's present in significant quantities in oats. So if you are cooking your oats, you might degrade the phytic acid 40%. Fermentation does more. So if you do overnight oats and they're truly fermented, you're gonna get rid of more phytic acid. But a lot of people are not overnight fermenting their oats. And if they're cooking it, they're still gonna have at least half of the phytic acid in there. And so the problem with phytic acid is that any mineral-rich foods that you eat with the oats won't have the same nutritional value, because that phytic acid will chelate those minerals and prevent their absorption. We see this in studies with things like corn and beans, which are also high in phytic acid, and zinc administration. There was a really interesting study from like 50 years ago where they gave people oysters, very bioavailable zinc. You give people an oyster, you can see the amount of zinc in the blood rise. You give people that oyster with corn, it abrogates, so it abolishes at least half of the absorption of the zinc. You give it with both corn and beans, you get 0 zinc absorption in the human body. The same thing happens with oats. If you were to eat oats with oysters, it's not what most people eat for breakfast, or oats with steak, then the zinc, the copper, the iron, the selenium, the manganese, the magnesium, all of these divalent cations are not going to be absorbed as well because of the phytic acid in the oats that sort of chelos those minerals in your gut and steals them. So look, if you're gonna do overnight oats and you're gonna get organic oats and you're gonna eat the oats with nothing else, then you're not gonna have all those problems, but you're still gonna get the saponins, the heavy metals, and the mold toxins. But if you're eating those oats with milk and you wanna get that calcium, you're not getting the calcium from the oatmeal because that phytic acid is impairing its absorption. So I just don't see a reason to eat oats. What should you eat instead? I think there are tons of breakfasts that are much more nutrient rich without any of these problems, without any of these defense chemicals, without any of these heavy metals, without any of these mold toxins, things like eggs, things like a steak or a hamburger, just fruit, raw milk. That's what I would eat for breakfast. But oats, this is the worst breakfast people could possibly eat, and it's pervasive. Like, people celebrate their oats.
What about just good old-fashioned yogurt with some berries?
Yeah,
I mean,
preferably raw. I'm a huge fan of raw dairy versus pasteurized, but yeah.
Before I dive into that, after today's video, our sponsor is House of Macadamia. Before you skip this ad, let me tell you that this is a 20% off discount link plus a free box of macadamia nut creamer. So it's pure macadamia nuts, 100% macadamia nuts that you reconstitute with water to make a macadamia nut milk, or straight add to your coffee as a creamer. You get a free box, you just have to make sure you add it to your cart. But 20% off whatever you want from them, whether it's straight up macadamia nuts, whether it's going to be their cold pressed macadamia nut oil, their macadamia nut bars, which you've probably seen in Starbucks now, they're everywhere. They're straight up macadamia nuts, they're sugar-free chocolate covered macadamia nuts, sugar-free white chocolate covered macadamia nuts, a couple different kinds of macadamia nut bars, and their macadamia nut butter. Okay, not only are they the most cost-effective macadamia nut you're gonna find, but they support the farmers. They literally are supporting the South African farmers who are taking a serious hit right now if you pay any attention to what's going on over there. Everything is processed within an hour's drive of where it's grown and harvested. This is the most legit macadamia product you are going to find. And it's 20% off using that link down below. Please don't skip it. Give them a shot. It helps this channel. These sponsors keep me doing what I'm doing. So check them out down below underneath this video. Yeah, I mean, that's just gonna give you like all the nostalgia of a breakfast-like food.
Yeah.
Without that, I mean, that's kind of like my big breakfast food anyway. That's like typically my post-workout thing. So it's like just big old bowl of Greek yogurt with a bunch of blueberries and, you know, whatever. And, you know, depending on where you are in the United States, like, yeah, you might be able to get fermented, you might be able to get raw, but, you know, California, fortunate enough, out of all things that California doesn't allow, they actually do allow raw dairy,
yes,
which is bizarre, but I embrace it. So that's pretty awesome. I want to touch on something that you said that was very important that people don't often understand. And I know because I grew up, or I spent my teenage years in a house that had a lot of black mold. Mm-hmm. So it had a lot of Stachyboitrys, so a lot of really bad black mold. And as a result of that, I am now very sensitive to mold foods mm-hmm. that are high in mold, which could be one of the reasons why I have such a sensitivity to rice in particular.
Yes.
And that is one thing that we have seen in various literature is that like when you do like have high mold exposure, then you develop kind of these repeat sensitivities to it. But even so like for me, like I feel that. I notice when I eat high mold foods, I get wheezy, started getting symptomatic again. But what happens to even just a regular person if like it's a high mold count food and they're just, I know you can probably get away with eating it a couple times, it's not a big deal, but like as this stuff starts to aggregate and cumulatively build up, what happens with mold?
I mean, it's going to be different on the person, and I think it's probably going to be cumulative unless your body's getting rid of it, but it's going to accumulate in your body, as you said. And then the other thing is that a lot of people probably won't even have enough consistency in their diet, or may not have enough consistency in their diet to realize what's going on. Maybe it's a headache, maybe it's a little irritability, maybe it's just that your gut feels bad, or you have some gas, or you get a rash that goes away. But these immunologic things, they add up. It's just like, why would you want to, you know, stub your toe or kick yourself in the shin and injure your body or not be at your best when you could be? So people might say, oh, a headache, or, you know, a rash, or not sleeping well, or a stomach ache. Don't be a baby, but what's the point? Why would you do something that's harmful for you with all the other things we described with the oats? So, but for some people, it could be very significant sensitivities. I mean, maybe somebody grew up with mold like you and doesn't even understand why every time they eat oatmeal in the morning, they either have gas or bloating or constipation, or they get a headache, or they're just irritable, they don't sleep well that night. So, I mean, these mold toxins can do all sorts of different things in the human body, predominantly around hormones also. So it's just, why would you put more stress on your body? Why would you put more of these toxins in your body than you need to? And cumulatively, they will accumulate and could cause issues for a lot of people long term. The idea is, if you have a very specific diet and then you introduce oats as a one-time thing, you might see it, or you might, if you make one change and you eat oats every day for the, in the morning for a week, you might say, I don't feel that good at the end of the week. Yeah. What's going on here? But I think a lot of people just don't feel good all the time, and they don't understand what it is. And it's probably a myriad of things that are happening, but oats could certainly be one of these. And I think it's hilarious that that people are making light of the fact that I'm calling out oats or saying they're good for humans, or thinking it's funny that I'm actually telling people that there are these toxins in oats. But I think that getting rid of oats in the morning is only going to improve people's health. And it's crazy how many people are reacting to this. They get triggered by their oats.
Well, and then, one thing that I have talked about that's triggered people as well is instant oats, because then you're like into an entirely different category. Now, say what you want about oats, no matter where you stand on the spectrum. You've got now an adulterated, additionally processed oat that's been basically instantized so that it's going to cook really fast. So there's sometimes chemicals added to that, but it's usually just adulterated to be. It ends up becoming ridiculously high glycemic, which isn't necessarily the problem, which we can talk about as well. But then also the additional sugar, the additional chemicals. Like if you look at a packet of instant oats, sometimes oats are the third ingredient. It's just to tell you the additional things that are added on top of that. So that's just a very important point that, you're going for oats, but are you going for instant oats, which is even potentially worse.
Yeah.
I do want to touch on the glycemic issue because I think that people think of oats as problematic because they could be high glycemic when they're cooked instant and they're hot and whatever. So people focus on that as the problem. Mm-hmm. And we've talked a lot in other videos about, hey, the glucose spike isn't necessarily the problem.
Right.
And I think even with oats, there's people on the internet right now that demonize oats because of the glycemic load and the glycemic spike. And I'm kind of from the same school of thought as you. I don't see oats as problematic because of the carbohydrate content. Right. I see them as potentially problematic because of, these other situations, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that the carbohydrates in the oats are the problem. I think it's the heavy metals, the saponins, the mold toxins, the phytic acid, the pesticides. It's not a great food for humans. But, in terms of the glucose spike, we've talked about it before, but I don't fear that. I think that's normal human physiology that your body is ready for. Your body, in some ways, I think it's a signal of abundance for humans. We see insulin released. That's not a bad thing. Insulin has valuable roles in the human body when you eat carbohydrates and your blood sugar goes up. Insulin signals to the kidney to hold on to minerals and electrolytes, allows for electrolyte balance. Insulin is going to trigger certain reactions in terms of our antioxidant balance, this redox balance. It's signaling in some ways for more glutathione production. Insulin is an anti-catabolic hormone that has valuable roles in the human body. It's something that if you limit too much, we run into problems with. We want some insulin, and getting insulin after we eat carbohydrates is fine. That's not an issue for me. The issue comes when people are metabolically unwell. They're metabolically broken or dysfunctional, and then you'll see that a glucose spike is persistent. It doesn't go up and come back down, and then you have an issue. But that's more of an indication that you have an issue. It's not the sugar or the carbohydrates that are the problem. It's that your body is foundationally broken at a metabolic enzymatic level, and that's the problem. And you can see it reflected in abnormal glucose curves if you're wearing a CGM or something, but the glucose and the carbohydrates didn't cause the problem in the first place. As we're talking about in this video, certain sources of carbohydrates, I believe fruit and honey, are better for humans than grain-based sources of carbohydrates because of the contamination of these things, because of the defense chemicals they contain, like saponins, et cetera, that are difficult to get rid of. But in general, carbohydrates per se, I don't think cause problems for humans, and the glucose response is a normal part of human physiology, and it's beneficial in many ways.
Now, before we wrap this video up, oat milk. All right, I know you have a
no
lot.
No better than oatmeal.
So is it essentially just a soup of the things that are in oats, or?
It is, plus carrageenan, plus seed oils, plus other stabilizers that could be problematic. We were actually looking at Starbucks. So the Starbucks oat milk, seed oils are so pervasive that if you get an oat milk latte at Starbucks, I think the first ingredient in that oat milk is canola oil. Just like the first ingredient in instant oats is not oats, the first ingredient in oat milk at Starbucks is not even oats, it's canola oil. You're getting a seed oil in your latte at Starbucks. So that's crazy. And some oat milks are, quote, better than others. I have a problem with all of them because they contain oats, just like I have a problem with almond milks because they contain almonds, which have many of the same issues, defense chemicals, digestive enzyme inhibitors, et cetera. But yeah, oat milk is even worse than regular oats. Most of them do contain seed oils. Oatly is a common brand, and if you read the label, it says low erucic acid rapeseed oil, which is just canola oil. There's carrageenan, there's other emulsifiers. Sometimes you'll find polysorbate 80, E471 is an emulsifier they use at Starbucks, which could end up in oat milks or anything that's thickened. So there's all kinds of problems with oat milks. It's probably even worse than oatmeal if that's possible.
If someone is purely legitimately lactose intolerant, where they can't, is there a form of, dare I say, alternative milk that would be better than the others?
Yeah.
If you had to be put on the spot.
Yeah, it's called raw milk. You know, raw milk contains lactase. And I've heard this over and over from people because I'm in Los Angeles right now. We just did a smoothie collab with Erewhon, and I met literally hundreds of people, and so many of them came up with anecdotes about how raw milk was better for them than pasteurized milk from a lactose perspective, from an eczema perspective, from an autoimmune perspective, from a gut perspective. And if you're very, very sensitive to lactose, do something like a fermented raw dairy, like a kefir or a yogurt. The difference between those is that kefir is different culture, so there's different bacteria in kefir, usually more different types of bacteria, and it's fermented at room temperature for a longer amount of time. Yogurt is fermented at a slightly higher temperature with less different types of bacteria for a shorter amount of time. So I'm more a fan of kefir, but kefir or yogurt from a raw milk, that's gonna have much less lactose. Most of the time, people who are lactose intolerant can do a kefir. If you can't do that, you can do a raw cheese. And even in California or even in Target, you can find raw cheese. I was there yesterday doing some content, and you can find a Gruyere, which is made from raw milk. It says it right there on the label of Swiss cheese. So a type of Swiss cheese, not technically Swiss cheese. So there are many options, but if people are very lactose intolerant, starting with small doses of raw milk or slightly larger doses of raw kefir, your body will adapt to that, and I think you'll be just fine. And there's so many cool stories about people who have found massive improvements in their health with dairy, because there's so many unique nutrients in dairy that we don't get. Calcium, where are you getting your calcium from if you're not drinking dairy? Maybe some other places, but it's a valuable thing for humans, plus other peptides, choline, vitamin K2, biotin, all kinds of good stuff in milk.
Just tastes so
it's delicious.
Good.
And I mean, the fats in there are valuable too. Stearic acid is prominent in milk. That saturated fat is healthy for humans, yeah.
No, I've never looked back, honestly.
Me neither, man. Lots of options.
Well, right on, man. Well, as always, where can everyone find you, brother?
Paul Saladino, MD, on all the socials.
Right on. As always, see you tomorrow.